health, her heart is fragile.
At 1:47 a.m., the cameras went dark. Not a glitch, not a power outage. They were music physically removed. 41 minutes later, she was gone. Blood on the porch. Medication left behind. Phone still inside the house. Music. And now, investigators have entered the property connected to one of America's most recognizable television faces, Savannah Guthrie. What did they find inside? Why did it take 41 full minutes before anyone was removed from that home? And who? Music spends that long inside the house of an 84-year-old woman with a pacemaker. This wasn't a smash and grab. This wasn't random. And according to sources close to the investigation, what authorities uncovered during their latest sweep has raised more questions than answers. Disabled security devices, additional forensic evidence, and digital traces that don't make sense. Is this a targeted abduction, a staged distraction, or something far darker hiding behind the headlines? Tonight, we're breaking down everything investigators don't want you to overlook, because the truth, it might be more disturbing than anyone expected.
If you are hearing this, you are a strong woman.
The instant deputies arrived at the residence reportedly linked to Savannah Guthrie, they could tell this call was far from ordinary. It wasn't a simple welfare visit. It wasn't a standard theft report. This situation carried a completely different weight. Yellow tape was stretched around the scene within minutes. The atmosphere in the Catalina foothills felt tense and unusually still. Nearby residents watched quietly from behind their curtains. Squad cars filled the narrow desert roadway like a scene pulled straight from a Netflix true crime episode. Inside, forensic teams advanced inch by inch, precise and controlled, because the evidence in front of them didn't resemble a careless forced entry. The porch revealed the earliest clues. Tiny drops of blood. Not a large spill, not the kind of spray you'd expect from a brutal struggle, but clearly visible, clearly significant, enough to prove there was physical contact, enough to suggest pushback. Later lab work identified the blood as Nancy's, an 84-year-old woman with restricted movement and a pacemaker. Think about that for a moment. This wasn't someone capable of running, not someone able to pursue, not someone built for a prolonged struggle. And yet, something serious unfolded right there on that porch.
If you go from 1:47 a.m., which is when the doorbell cam got disconnected, to 2:28 a.m., which is when her pacemaker, meaning she, got far enough away from her phone that the app stopped communicating with the pacemaker, that is 41 minutes. 41 minutes. What was a kidnapper doing in Nancy Guthrie's home for 41 minutes? How does it take 41 minutes to...
Then came the detail that changed everything. The camera taken down from the wall at exactly 1:47 a.m. Not broken, not short-circuited, carefully detached. That single fact completely reshaped the direction of the case, because you don't remove a camera unless you already know it exists. You prepared for it. You expected it. And if that step was planned in advance, what other steps were mapped out beforehand? Detectives continued through the living area. No furniture flipped. No cabinets forced open. Valuable jewelry still in place. Expensive devices still sitting out. Nothing cleared off the shelves. This clearly wasn't a hunt for profit. Her phone remained inside the home. Her smartwatch, her prescriptions, even the critical heart medication she depends on, all left exactly where she had put them. If this were a kidnapping for leverage, why ignore the medicine she cannot live without? If this were simple theft, why walk past everything worth taking? Then investigators focus on the sequence of events. The clock read 1:47 a.m. The camera gone.
As though she fought, something happened to cause her to bleed on her front porch patio area, as it appears she was being taken out of the home. But 41 minutes? You got to take off some time to smash the cameras, but that happened, 1:47, the doorbell got disconnected. How long could that possibly take? 10 minutes? 1:57 now it's 31 minutes. To get her and get out of the house? Why? That's too long. I don't know whether something else happened inside that house. Was there a struggle? Did someone take her life? Is that what happened? and then in a panic removed her. So with her,
2:28 a.m., the pacemaker monitoring app suddenly stopped syncing with her phone. A gap of 41 minutes. 41 full minutes spent inside that residence. And crime experts all agree on one key principle. Real abductors don't linger. Speed is their protection. The longer they remain on site, the higher the chance of getting caught. So what unfolded during that 41-minute window? Was someone hunting for a specific item? Did an argument erupt inside? Did a tense encounter spiral out of control? Or did the original plan fall apart halfway through? Chris Nanos from the Pima County Sheriff's Department made it clear in his early remarks. This case was treated as critical from the very beginning. Homicide investigators were assigned immediately, which spoke volumes on its own. Soon after, the Federal Bureau of Investigation stepped in as well. Federal teams don't deploy that fast without serious concern. Drones were launched. 9 search units deployed. Helicopters scanned the vast desert landscape stretching for miles. Yet nothing surfaced. No clear escape trail through the brush. No dump vehicle located. Just an unsettling lack of answers. Some neighbors mentioned spotting an unmarked white van in the area days before. But was that a real lead, or fear turning an ordinary sighting into something bigger?
It felt like somebody means business. I mean, when you read it, it's very detailed. This person thought through, I believe, again, if it's legit, this person thought through the markers of showing that it's real. The Bitcoin address, we checked immediately, and it's a real address. The FBI mentioned at the news conference today something that we had seen, where they mentioned the Apple Watch and the floodlight. And that was what really put my antenna up, and we immediately called the sheriff. The letter says, you will have no way of contacting me. This is the only contact.
At the same time, ransom-style emails started appearing, but not to relatives first. They were sent to media platforms like TMZ instead. That alone raised eyebrows, because authentic ransom communication is usually private, strategic, and tightly controlled. These messages were the opposite. They were loud, scattered, and attention-driven. The senders demanded millions in Bitcoin and mentioned details about the residents that were never publicly released. But investigators quickly ran into another complication. Copycats. False ransom claims began pouring in from all directions. One individual was even taken into custody after allegedly sending fake threats just to make himself part of the story. Now the situation had split into 2 separate puzzles. A physical enigma inside the home and a digital storm unfolding outside it. Right at the center of the spotlight stood Savannah Guthrie, stepping back from national television and facing cameras, not in her usual role as an anchor, but as a daughter, publicly stating that they were prepared to speak. That moment shifted the narrative completely. The public wasn't just following an investigation anymore. They were watching a family navigate it in real time. And if the abduction scenario is genuine, then whoever is responsible is likely watching the coverage too. The biggest question has now evolved beyond who took Nancy. It's this: why remain inside a house for 41 minutes when the objective could have been completed in 5? And what exactly happened in that unseen window of time?
To great lengths in sending this email to us, in making sure that it stays anonymous. I don't know that the FBI is at all close to figuring out where it came from.
If this letter is legitimate, and I know we're going to keep saying that, it's important to say it, but if so, it means that the sender's doing exactly what they said they were going to do. They sent the letter and that's it.
They began the letter, I don't think I'm giving anything away here. They began the letter by saying that Nancy is okay but scared. So they say she is okay, and also that she's aware of the letter and the demand.
The further investigators pushed into the case, the more unusual it started to look, because this was no longer only about a missing 84-year-old woman. It had become about behavioral patterns, and patterns rarely mislead. When forensic specialists conducted a second, more detailed sweep of the residence, their focus wasn't limited to fingerprints alone. They analyzed sequence, the timeline of movement, what was handled first, what shifted later, and what someone clearly chose not to touch. That deeper reconstruction is when the most unsettling signs began to appear. Sections of the house didn't look trashed. They looked deliberately navigated, not torn apart, carefully moved through. A few rooms showed minimal but noticeable interference. One drawer left slightly open. Documents nudged out of alignment, but not removed. A corridor light still switched on. Minor clues on their own, but together they point to someone acting with direction, not fear. This didn't resemble panic. It looked measured. It looked intentional. Officials confirmed that more DNA samples were recovered from multiple interior locations tied to property connected with Savannah Guthrie, though they have not disclosed the exact spots publicly.
We're putting so much attention, everybody is looking at ransom, that it's easy to overlook the other possibilities. And the fact that you honed in on this is really good, the 41 minutes, because that could be the time period when somebody was looking for something. So they go into the house, there was no robbery, but were they looking for something else? Is there paperwork? Is there something going on that we don't know about with Miss Guthrie, and somebody was in there trying to find something in particular? Because I can't think of any other reason for them to be in there for that.
Officials still haven't revealed what type of samples they recovered, and they certainly haven't confirmed whether any of it points to someone outside the immediate family circle. But one thing stood out to experienced observers. Homicide detectives were assigned from the very first day, and that decision is never random. At the same time, the ransom narrative became even more tangled. Messages demanding millions in Bitcoin were sent to media outlets, including TMZ, instead of going privately to relatives. That detail alone raised serious concern among former federal investigators. Because if the real goal is money, why bring in publicity? Why pull in headlines and public attention? Unless public pressure itself was part of the design. Authorities quietly began considering another angle. What if the ransom demand wasn't the motive at all, but a smokescreen? Look at the sequence. Cameras deliberately removed. 41 minutes spent inside. Critical heart medication left behind for an elderly patient who depends on it. Ransom notes routed to the press. That doesn't signal urgency. It suggests staging. It suggests performance. Then the cyber trail entered the picture. Digital forensics teams working with the Federal Bureau of Investigation tracked the Bitcoin wallet referenced in one of the messages and confirmed that the wallet itself was legitimate and active.
A clearly successful abduction. If it is a kidnapping, it's poorly undertaken. You don't spend 41 minutes as a kidnapper in the place where you're taking your victim. You get in and you get out. And that's why I'm leaning away.
The wallet address investigators tracked showed real blockchain activity, but no movement, no incoming funds, no outgoing transfers. Just sitting there, untouched, like it had been created and left waiting. That raised a new question. Was it a decoy, a placeholder, or evidence that whoever sent the demand expected payment later? Not right away? Online reactions surged. Social platforms turned into investigation hubs. Users replayed surveillance timelines frame by frame. Amateur analysts argued over whether the white van spotted earlier was meaningless or pre-incident scouting. Some suspected the property had been monitored for weeks. Others stayed locked on one number, 41 minutes. Veteran crime profilers kept repeating the same principle. Real abductors reduce exposure and exit fast. Spending 41 minutes inside a secured residence signals one of three things: a failed step, a targeted search, or an unexpected development. Chris Nanos of the Pima County Sheriff's Department stated publicly that Nancy was believed taken against her will, but he also acknowledged something investigators rarely admit. Certain scene elements were being intentionally withheld. Why hold details back? Because sometimes what stays unreleased protects the integrity of the case more than what is shared. As days passed with no verified proof of life, no identified suspect, and no confirmed outcome, the mission tone changed, from rapid recovery to critical countdown. Savannah Guthrie appeared before cameras not in anchor mode, but as family, saying they were prepared to pay. That declaration echoed nationwide, but it also created a hard question. If this were purely about money, leverage would be used quickly. If not about money, then what was the driver? And if those 41 minutes weren't spent executing an abduction, what were they actually spent doing? Because sometime between 1:47 and 2:28 a.m., inside that quiet Tucson home, something occurred that reshaped the entire case. By the 8th day, the operation no longer felt like a rapid rescue. It felt like controlled dread. Air units still circled the Catalina foothills. Ground teams with K9 still combed dry desert stretches. Highway billboards still displayed Nancy's image across regions. But behind closed doors, investigators had shifted focus. The key question was no longer only where is she? It had become, what exactly happened inside the house? Authorities quietly returned to property for another evidence pass. Multiple items were removed from the garage. Vehicles were taken for examination. A wired rooftop device was detached. Evidence bags moved under strict chain of custody control. Scenes are only reprocessed when earlier conclusions feel incomplete. That alone spoke volumes. Then came the silence gap. No second ransom message. No validated proof of life. No follow-up demand. Unusual behavior for a supposed multi-million Bitcoin scheme. Former federal agents began suggesting a difficult theory during broadcast interviews. What if the ransom message existed to buy time? Time for what? Distance, narrative control, investigative misdirection? Because remaining inside a house for 41 minutes does not match grab-and-go behavior. It matches situation management. And management implies complication. During this period, Savannah Guthrie stepped back from broadcast duties and appeared with siblings in appeals that observers described as emotional but strategically structured, similar to messaging guided by crisis negotiation consultants. They highlighted health fragility, medication urgency, faith, and hope, and one line drew expert attention. They needed absolute confirmation she was alive. Modern technology complicates proof-of-life verification. Images can be fabricated. Voices can be cloned. Synthetic media has made authentication a forensic task. Any proof received would require pixel-level and waveform-level analysis. Investigators also lean harder into the targeted incident theory. If this was targeted, and many specialists believe it was, then the offender likely knew the layout, the security positions, the victim's mobility limits, the nightly routine, and the camera placement. That level of awareness is not random. It is informed. Chris Nanos repeated that Nancy was believed taken unwillingly and that hope remained. Carefully balanced language, because law enforcement weighs optimism against physical evidence. And the evidence painted a narrow, troubling frame. Blood on the porch, additional DNA under lab review, valuables untouched, no confirmed sightings, no named suspect. The investigation now sits in the space between possibility and probability. If she is alive, each missed dose of medication increases danger. If she is not, then the 41 minutes were not preparation. They were aftermath. That is a scenario officials rarely say publicly, but always evaluate privately. What remains is stark. An elderly woman missing, a nationally recognized broadcaster pleading his family, millions mentioned, cameras removed, a 41-minute void and growing silence. Until someone explains that window between 1:47 and 2:28 a.m., this is not just a disappearance. It is an unresolved timeline mystery. So here's the question many avoid saying out loud. What truly happened during those 41 minutes? Was this a precise, patient abduction plan carried out step by step, or did something inside that house force a sudden change? We know the cameras were removed. We know blood was present. We know medication stayed behind. We know ransom messages reached outlets like TMZ. Then everything went quiet. Silence is never neutral. It signals either concealment or waiting. Savannah Guthrie told the country they are ready to talk, ready to pay, ready to act. But if this were about money, where is the continued contact? And if it isn't, what is the real objective? Control, retaliation, or a targeted search for something specific inside that home? Share your theory. Targeted operation, staged diversion, or a darker scenario still unrevealed. Because one fact remains, someone knows exactly what occurred in that 41-minute gap. Until that person speaks, the case stays open. If you want updates when new developments surface, follow closely and enable alerts. Every timeline shift, every forensic result, every overlooked detail matters. Because cases like this don't just fade, and neither do the questions.